Or do you want me to introduce the first one?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
The question was, I don't tend to sleep well. Can you review some of your favorite strategies for improving sleep naturally?
Right. So context, everyone remembers, we talked about basic or primary human needs, right? And one of the things was sleep.
Yeah.
Right. And how improper and poor sleep definitely drives a lot of physiological dysfunction that makes it difficult for us to stay in a positive mindset and makes it difficult for people to stay in a mindset supporting health.
Yes, definitely.
So just to bring it back around and where that came from. So you've had your own journey with sleep recently.
Yeah.
That said you were comfortable sharing with people.
Yeah, I don't mind sharing it all.
Do you want to
I mean, I
talk a little
think,
bit about it?
you know, it's oftentimes something we feel like we don't have control over, you know, is, I have many patients also that'll report not being able to sleep through the night.
Oh, I hear all the time.
Yeah.
Or sleep is a major issue.
And I go through phases. Sometimes I feel like I sleep really well. And sometimes I feel like I have trouble sleeping. Sometimes it's due to my own sort of tendencies towards anxiety and overactive kind of thought patterns. And sometimes it's just, I don't know why. I just like all of a sudden I'm not sleeping. Sometimes it'll be during change of seasons or that kind of thing. And in the past, I would always rely on a melatonin supplement, which, you know, I don't think is terrible, but I'm the type of person that doesn't really like to take anything if I don't have to, or, you know, I didn't want to be on it. So there were little habits that had crept in just from modern life that I guess I never thought that much about, such as having my phone, because I use that as my alarm clock next to my bed, and without really thinking about it before bed, I would be on my device, you know, just to unwind a little bit. So now I do not sleep with any electronics in my room at all, except for my Kindle, because I do let myself, after I turn off all of the lights, read my Kindle for a few minutes, you know, and that's I find a much more gentle way to go to sleep, is because it matters what you think about and what you're taking in, what you're consuming, those last thoughts before you doze off, you know. And when you're just kind of like inundating your brain with a lot of different information, it is stimulating, and I think it makes it harder to get into that appropriate you know, calm nervous system kind of like state to sleep well. So that's one of the things that I do.
You started doing a few things, like you started being more active in the morning.
Yes.
Right. You started like getting up when the weather was nicer. You were trying to get outside
and
you were trying to do some chores and like be
morning.
active to kind of get your circadian rhythm back in line. You were trying to get up at a similar time. You were going to bed earlier.
Yep.
Not staying up as late, trying to get up a little bit earlier, getting some activity in the morning, getting some light in your eyes.
Yes. That's important too.
It is important.
Yeah.
I mean, the number one thing for like helping people with jet lag is, you know, when you land somewhere, when you travel to like Europe or you on a flight, like one of the best things you can do is just get outside and get light in your eyes on the daily rhythm of wherever you're traveling to. You know, it's like when I've flown to Europe before, you leave at night from the East Coast and you arrive at like 6 a.m. in Europe because they're 5 hours ahead. So between the flight time and the time change, you get there and the sun is basically rising and you've hardly slept, right? Because you've been on a plane. So you just have to get that light in your eyes to like get your brain and your circadian rhythm in line. So yes, and people have said getting up, getting fresh light in your eyes. And then there was that doctor who wrote that adrenal reset book, I think, that was really popular. I think you told me about this.
Dr. Alan Christensen.
Yeah. Who's an ND. He's really smart.
Yeah.
But he had something that you had pulled out of there where it's like something about like the light and movement in the morning does a lot for getting your circadian rhythm balance. Yeah. And
my intention was to get out and walk, but then I'm so used to getting up and having like a more gentle morning where I would sit and have coffee and do my journaling, you know, and read the Bible. I was just used to a very calm, kind of peaceful
Yeah.
morning, that I was having trouble getting myself to actually go, like, take a walk. So that's where the chores came from.
Mhm.
It was like something about doing those mundane chores with the light in my eyes outside. It just, like, it felt so, and it was right when we were in the middle of reading the Blue Zones book.
Yeah.
So it felt very,
Blue zone.
it just felt very like I was in touch with my humanness, and
Yeah.
it just wasn't so cerebral, which is, where we have to live a lot with the work that we do.
Yeah.
And
I think the important thing to note is that you hear these things all the time, right? Shut off your devices,
Yeah.
go to sleep earlier, wake up. And I think what's important is that, like, it took you probably almost 2 to 3 weeks to start to actually see the benefit. And
That's
I
a
think
good
what
point.
people don't realize is they hear these things of turn your TV off, don't be on your phone, wake up at the same time, go to sleep at the same time. But when you're stuck in a insomnia loop where you're having trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, you become so desperate for sleep that if you don't get results sometimes within a few nights, it's so disruptive to psychology and to how you feel that people tend to feel like it's never going to happen. And in your case, you really stuck with it week after week after week. And finally, after it seemed like it was never going to start working, it all of a sudden just started working, and you're completely off melatonin and completely off any supplements for sleep and sleeping pretty well. You probably have a much healthier sleep circadian rhythm.
I look forward to bedtime now too, because now that I have conditioned myself to lay down and read, like have that chunk of time where I read right before bed, I really look forward to it. It's like, it's almost like a little kid that gets excited for their bedtime story. I like really get excited. It doesn't feel so disconnected. It's like, oh, I get to go back to the story that I'm reading, So
it's nice to,
it feels very natural. And I'm very grateful that I stuck with it. And I forgot about that. I shut that part out of my head about how it wasn't really feeling like it was working at first.
about how long it took.
But I believed it was going to work. I knew that eventually my body was going to sleep properly. I did not want to be on the melatonin anymore.
You were on a high dose.
And I had been on it for a while, so I think it's fine short term, but I just didn't want to be on it.
I mean, speaking of melatonin, I don't have particular issues with it. I think the research is somewhat mixed. There's a lot of older research, particularly out of Italy, talking about how beneficial melatonin is, what a great anti-aging compound it is.
Right.
Then there's newer research that some people say may not be as good as we thought it was. There's a lot of debate about whether or not if you take melatonin, you won't produce it anymore, which, everybody says, but I've never seen any literature to actually justify that, because melatonin is regulated by the pineal gland, which doesn't have the negative feedback loop that our other hormones do that are regulated through the pituitary. So there's a lot of controversy around it. I feel like the safest bet is to keep your dosing low. I always felt that ideally anything below 1 milligram is considered probably to be very, very safe. Certainly if you're somewhere between 1 and 3 milligrams, it's probably fine. I don't like really going doses too much higher than that. But it is a useful tool. I would say melatonin for most people is more useful for helping with the transition from wakefulness to sleep, and is less effective for helping people stay asleep. Now, you had found that for you, higher doses of melatonin would actually keep you asleep throughout the night, which is how you got up to that dosage.
I was at like 12.
12 milligrams. Because you were sensitive to some of the other botanicals that I often recommend for sleep.
I was very groggy the next day. I didn't feel good.
You didn't like some of those.
No.
So I think melatonin's okay. I mean, I'm just going to tail into what I do for sleep for people. Ashwagandha is generally a very well tolerated botanical that doesn't cause a lot of drowsiness, that has some potential health benefits. There's a couple of strains of it that have been more clinically studied, but it helps buffer cortisol. So I find that's helpful. The botanicals like passion flower and California poppy, those naturally stimulate GABA receptors. Those are useful for sleep. So, there are some GABA. You really were not great with GABA, but you're very sensitive. A lot of the patients we work with really like the pharma GABA, which is like a plant naturally derived source of gamma aminobutyric acid, which is a compound that binds GABA receptors in the brain gently, which inhibits neurotransmission and kind of slows down the active potential of the brain.
Mhm.
So it kind of calms things down a little bit.
Mhm.
So I find those very, very useful to help people with staying asleep. But of course, if you can, I was never a good sleeper. I haven't been a good sleeper since I was very young.
Mhm.
So my sleep tends to be light and disruptive, and that even runs in my family. So it's like sometimes I feel like I need a little bit of extra support, and it's more than just my circadian rhythm. I think that I've genetically inherited probably some poor sleep physiology.
Mhm.
So
All right. Well, I definitely think that, if you're suffering from poor sleep, don't think you're stuck that way. Because with enough tenacity and, patience of
yeah.
new routines, I do believe it'll pay off. It did for me, and I didn't think I could get off of that
Yeah,
stuff.
well, it's frustrating because all the other things that we talked about, you can easily change. Anybody
Right.
can drink more water with more effort.
Right.
You can exercise with more effort. You can eat healthier. But like if you can't sleep well, sometimes you can't just say, oh, I'll just try harder.
Right. Yeah, I would be
So,
laying there in the middle of the night
yeah.
wanting to be asleep.
So people need that.
Yeah.